Behind your silence is a prayer, and God's love is already answering it. Listen, you don't need to have the right words right now. You don't even need to pray out loud, because sometimes silence is prayer. That sigh you let out today, the one no one saw, heaven heard it. You've been holding so much in. The pain, the confusion, the fear of not being understood. You keep wondering if God still listens when you can't speak, if he still moves when all you can do is cry quietly. Let me tell you something straight. Yes, he does. While you sit in silence thinking nothing is happening, love is already moving. The doors you thought were closed are shifting. The answers you stopped expecting are forming. Because God doesn't wait for perfect prayers. He responds to honest hearts. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning, full of surrender, full of faith you don't even realize you still have. So breathe. Heaven is working even in the pauses of your life. You haven't been forgotten. You're being answered quietly, faithfully right now. When silence speaks, there's a kind of silence that feels heavy, the kind that fills a room even when you're not alone. It's the sound of unanswered prayers, of words that got stuck somewhere between your chest and heaven. You try to speak, but all that comes out is a sigh. You want to believe that God still hears you, but it's hard when all you get back is quiet. You've been here before, lying awake at night staring at the ceiling trying to make sense of what feels like emptiness. You whisper, "Are you still there?" And the silence answers back with nothing but your own heartbeat. But what if that heartbeat is his reply? What if the silence isn't punishment and it's participation? A way for love to speak in a language softer than words. Sometimes the most powerful prayers are the ones we never say out loud. They come out as exhaustion, as a single tear, as a long pause before you start the day. And yet, those moments are sacred. Because while you think you're saying nothing, your soul is saying everything. And heaven listens differently than you think. You see, prayer isn't just about speaking, it's about being known. And there's not a single silence too deep for God to understand. He reads the ache beneath your stillness. He hears the questions that your voice is too tired to form. He feels every unspoken word that trembles behind your ribs. And in that invisible space, something holy happens. Love starts answering quietly. It doesn't always come as a miracle or a sudden breakthrough. It comes as calm when you expected chaos. It comes as a strength you didn't know you had. It comes as the friend who calls at the exact moment you needed to hear a familiar voice. It comes as a tiny shift in your spirit, like air finally returning to lungs that forgot how to breathe. That's how love works. It doesn't need to be loud to be present. It doesn't need to be visible to be real. And sometimes, it doesn't even need words to respond, because love already knows and answers before you ask. You think your silence means distance, but maybe it means trust. Maybe heaven trusts you enough to let you rest instead of repeat. Maybe silence is God's way of saying, "I'm already working. Stop striving. Just stay." Have you ever noticed how the moments you feel most alone are often the ones that shape you the most? They force you to look inward, to reach deeper than surface faith, to discover the part of you that still believes even without evidence. And that quiet strength, that whisper of hope that refuses to die, that's not you holding on to God. That's God holding on to you. Because the truth is, silence doesn't mean absence. It means intimacy. It means you've reached the point where words are no longer needed to be understood, like two hearts that beat in rhythm, even without a sound. He's there, not on the edge of your prayers, but in the space between them. He's there in your quiet drives home, in the pauses between your thoughts, in the gentle ways your heart keeps beating even when you feel like stopping. You may not hear him the way you expect to, but you can feel him. In the peace that doesn't make sense. In the endurance that keeps showing up. In the way life keeps moving forward even when you thought it couldn't. That's not coincidence, and that's communication. So maybe tonight, don't try to force the words. Don't rush the answers. Just sit in the silence and let it speak. Because behind that stillness, something sacred is unfolding. Love is listening. Love is responding. And love, real love, doesn't need to make noise to make a miracle. When God works quietly. It's easy to trust when everything moves, isn't it? When doors open, when prayers are answered, when the signs are clear. But what about when everything stops? When the world goes still and it feels like heaven is holding its breath? That's the moment most people mistake for absence, but it's not absence. It's activity you can't see yet. Because God doesn't always work in noise and spectacle. Sometimes he works in silence and in the slow rearranging of things you didn't even know needed shifting. He moves beneath the surface in quiet alignments, in small mercies disguised as ordinary days. While you're waiting for the big moment, he's steadying the ground beneath your feet. We often look for fireworks, for divine movement that's visible, measurable, loud. But the truth is, the greatest miracles are often the quietest ones. The healing that happens slowly. The heart that begins to hope again. The peace that replaces panic before you even notice it. Those are the fingerprints of a God who doesn't need to announce himself to prove he's near. Think about the seeds hidden beneath the soil. You can't see them breaking open, but they are. In the dark, in the dirt, something sacred is growing. Quietly, persistently, faithfully. And one day, what was buried will bloom. That's how God works too. He plants answers before you even know the questions exist. And by the time you're ready to see the fruit, the roots have already done their work. Maybe that's why he doesn't always reveal his process. Because if you saw it too soon, you might try to interfere. You'd rush the growth. You'd dig up what he's still nurturing. So instead, he lets you think it's stillness when it's actually strategy. He lets you feel the waiting while he's perfecting the outcome. And when it's time, when it's truly time, everything will unfold so effortlessly that you'll realize he never stopped working. You'll look back and see how each delay was divine, how every detour protected you, how every not yet was his mercy keeping you from what you weren't meant to carry. God's quiet work often looks like nothing, until it becomes everything. Until you realize that the pain you thought would break you actually built you. That the prayer you thought went unanswered was answered in a way that made you wiser, softer, stronger. It's easy to believe in miracles when they're loud, but real faith is learning to believe in the ones that whisper, the ones that happen deep inside you, in places no one sees but God. The shift in your spirit, the stillness that settles over your thoughts, the strength that rises when there's no logical reason for it to be there. You may not see it right now, but things are moving. The same God who parted seas also works through gentle tides. The same God who spoke through fire now speaks through calm. And every second that feels like nothing is happening might be the very second everything begins to change. So don't mistake quiet for inactivity. Don't confuse silence with stillness. Because even when heaven seems hushed, grace is still working. Faith is still forming. Love is still building bridges you don't know you'll need yet. Trust the quiet. Rest in it. Because one day when you step into the answer you've been waiting for, you'll realize it wasn't that God was slow. It's that his love was precise. And you'll see that every unseen moment, every hidden hour, was part of a story that was unfolding exactly as it should. He was never far. He was never late. He was just working quietly, because real love doesn't need an audience. The heart that prays without words. There's a kind of prayer that doesn't sound like prayer at all. It doesn't begin with "Dear God" or end with "Amen." It happens in the middle of traffic when you're holding back tears. It happens when you look at the sky and just sigh. It happens when you're too tired to say anything, yet your soul refuses to give up. That's what heaven hears first. Not perfect sentences, but honest hearts. Because prayer isn't about vocabulary. It's about vulnerability. It's the invisible conversation between your pain and God's compassion. There are days you feel empty, when you think, "I've got nothing left to offer." But even that emptiness is sacred. It's the space where surrender begins. When words run out, what's left is truth. And God reads truth better than any speech. Every time you've whispered, "I can't do this anymore," that was a prayer. Every tear that fell quietly on your pillow, that was a prayer. Every deep breath you took when you wanted to scream, that was faith choosing to stay. You didn't need to speak for heaven to understand. Because God doesn't need your eloquence, He listens to your essence. Sometimes the most powerful prayers are made of silence, longing, and survival. You don't have to explain yourself to the one who already knows your heart. He's not waiting for you to say it perfectly. He's waiting for you to be honest. And in that honesty, something shifts. Not around you, but inside you. You start to feel seen, not by the world, but by love itself. It's strange, isn't it? You can sit there saying nothing and still feel heard. That's because God doesn't hear your mouth. He hears your heartbeat. He translates every ache, every doubt, every unspoken why into language only He understands. While you're trying to find the right words, He's already writing the response into your story. You might not see the answers right away, but you'll feel them. They come as small mercies, the sudden calm in your chest, the unexpected clarity, the strength to take one more step. Those are answers. Not loud, not dramatic, but enough to remind you that heaven is still in motion. If you could see what's happening behind the scenes, you'd stop calling your silence nothing. Because while you wait, God weaves. He gathers every broken piece of your heart, every unsaid prayer, every hidden hurt, and He turns them into something beautiful, piece by piece. It's quiet work, but it's sacred. So the next time you sit in stillness and wonder if your silence matters, remember this. Silence isn't empty. It's full of presence. And sometimes, that's where love speaks the loudest. The waiting that shapes you. No one likes to wait. Waiting feels like wasting time, like standing in the middle of life while everyone else keeps moving forward. You look around and think, why them? Why not me? Why is everything taking so long? But what if the waiting isn't a punishment? What if it's the workshop of grace, the place where strength is forged, faith is deepened, and love learns to last? Waiting exposes what's fragile in us. It stretches our patience, presses on our fears, and teaches us to trust something we cannot see. It's not comfortable. It's never meant to be. But it's the very tension that transforms you from believer to knower. Because faith isn't proven when everything arrives on time. It's proven when everything is delayed and you still choose to believe. There's a sacred kind of work happening in the waiting. The kind you can't post about, the kind no one applauds. It's invisible, but it's what shapes your soul. While you think nothing is happening, heaven is building endurance in your heart. You're learning how to stand still without losing hope. You're learning how to love God for who He is, not just for what He gives. You see, the waiting strips away illusions, the illusion of control, the illusion of timing, the illusion that your worth depends on how fast things happen. And when those illusions fall, what remains is pure trust. It's not glamorous, it's quiet. It's the kind of trust that whispers, "Even now I believe." If you listen closely, you'll notice that some of the most beautiful things in life take time. Seeds don't bloom overnight. Wounds don't heal instantly. Hearts don't learn peace in a moment. Everything holy takes time to grow. And maybe that's why God makes you wait. Not to test your patience, but to protect your purpose. Because some things can only mature in stillness. Every delay you hate is preparing you. Every unanswered prayer is anchoring you. Every season of silence is stretching your capacity for joy. And when what you've prayed for finally arrives, you'll realize you've become someone new. Someone who doesn't just receive blessings, but understands them. It's hard, I know. The nights when it feels like time has forgotten you. The mornings when hope feels heavier than joy. But that's the refining. That's the divine rhythm. Slow, steady, intentional. Because what God is building in you isn't temporary, it's eternal. When you finally reach the other side, you'll look back and see that the waiting wasn't wasted at all. It was the season that made you. It was where faith stopped being theory and became truth. It was where you discovered that hope isn't about getting what you want. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. So don't rush what heaven is still writing. Let the waiting do its work. Let it teach you to breathe, to trust, to rest. Because the very thing that feels like a delay is shaping you into the kind of soul that can carry what's coming next. Waiting isn't punishment. It's preparation. And when you finally see what love was doing in the silence, you'll realize it wasn't holding you back. It was holding you together. The love that answers before you ask. Have you ever noticed how sometimes the answer arrives before the question even forms? A call comes just when you feel most alone. An unexpected peace falls over you before you even begin to pray. You think, how could this be? I didn't even ask yet. That's how love works, quietly ahead of you, already preparing the road before you take your first step. You see, divine love doesn't wait for your request to move. It moves from knowing, not from asking. It sees the storm long before the clouds appear. It starts building shelter before you ever realize rain is coming. And while you wonder if heaven hears you, heaven is already answering in ways you don't yet understand. Sometimes the answer looks nothing like what you expected. It doesn't always come as relief. Sometimes it comes as redirection. It doesn't always come as comfort. Sometimes it comes as courage. But it always comes wrapped in wisdom, because love knows exactly what your soul needs even when you don't. Think about how many times you've looked back and said, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be who I am now. That's the proof, the pattern of grace that runs ahead of your awareness. You were being guided when you thought you were just guessing. You were being protected when you thought you were just unlucky. You were being loved before you even knew what to pray for. This love is proactive, not reactive. It doesn't wait for you to earn it, perfect yourself, or get it all right. It moves because that's what love does. It creates, it heals, it restores without keeping score. Even when you drift, even when you fall silent, it continues to weave good into your story. You can't outrun it. You can't out-sin it. You can't outgrow it. Because love isn't a response, it's a nature. And sometimes that nature reveals itself in subtle ways. The delay that saved you from a disaster you'll never know about. The disappointment that redirected you to a destiny you couldn't yet see. The heartbreak that cleared space for something holier. Those weren't coincidences. They were kindness disguised as detours. That's why you can rest even when you don't understand. Because love doesn't operate on panic. It doesn't wait for you to beg before it begins. It was already working while you were still doubting. Already arranging things while you were trying to fix them. Already holding you long before you knew you needed to be held. Maybe that's what real faith is. Learning to thank God before you see the outcome. To trust that what's coming is already infused with love. Because it began with love. When you truly grasp that, peace replaces anxiety. You stop fearing what's next because you realize you're never one step ahead or behind. You're exactly where grace planned for you to be. This love doesn't miss timing. It doesn't forget promises. It doesn't delay out of neglect, but out of precision. And when it finally reveals what it's been preparing, you'll stand there in awe. Not because everything finally makes sense, but because you'll realize it was love all along. You were never waiting for love to respond. Love was always waiting for you to notice. The purpose of silence. Silence can feel cruel when you're desperate for an answer. You pray, you wait, and nothing happens. No sign, no sound, no shift. Just quiet, the kind that echoes in your chest and makes you wonder if you've been forgotten. But what if silence isn't rejection? What if it's revelation, one that can only be learned when the noise is gone? Because silence, as heavy as it feels, isn't empty. It's full of things still being written. Heaven doesn't go silent to punish you. It goes silent to prepare you. When God is quiet, it's because the next thing He's building in your life needs room to take shape. And sometimes that means removing the noise, even the noise of your own expectations. We want answers now. We want to see, to hear, to feel something clear and immediate. But love doesn't rush revelation. It lets you grow into it. Because if you heard the full plan before you were ready, you might run in fear or change the path yourself. So he waits. And in that waiting, you're being strengthened to carry what's coming. Silence has a way of stripping away illusions. When the voices fade, when distractions fall, you begin to notice what's real. You learn to discern the difference between panic and purpose, between loneliness and solitude, between your will and his whisper. It's in that sacred stillness that faith matures, not because you receive new words, but because you begin to live the ones you already heard. Think about it. When everything is loud, you listen outward. When everything is silent, you start listening inward. And that's where God has been all along, not in the thunder, but in the still, small voice you almost overlooked. He doesn't shout for your attention, he waits for your awareness. It's in the silence that you start to remember who you are. You realize that faith isn't about constant confirmation. It's about constant connection. You stop chasing signs and start noticing presence. You stop demanding outcomes and start trusting process. That's the quiet transformation happening beneath the stillness. And as the days pass, the silence begins to change shape. It no longer feels like distance. It feels like depth. You start to feel peace again, not because everything is fixed, but because you've stopped fighting the quiet. You start to rest, and in that rest, revelation begins to rise, because silence is where clarity is born. It's where noise dies, and truth begins to breathe. The hardest part of faith isn't believing when you hear God. It's believing when you don't. It's standing still when every instinct tells you to run. It's trusting that what feels like a pause is actually the preparation of a promise. The silence is not the end of your story. It's the chapter that strengthens the tone for everything that follows. And when the sound finally returns, when the answer comes, when the light breaks through, you'll understand why the silence had to last as long as it did. Because it was never about withholding your answer. It was about refining your heart to receive it. You'll look back and say, he wasn't quiet, he was teaching me how to listen. So don't despise the silence. Embrace it. Let it do its holy work. Because silence isn't the absence of God. It's the atmosphere where his love grows roots deep enough to last a lifetime. When the answer comes disguised, sometimes the answer doesn't look like an answer at all. It looks like loss. It looks like the door closing, the friendship ending, the opportunity slipping away. It looks like silence stretching longer than you ever thought you could bear. And you whisper, this can't be the answer. This can't be love. But what if it is? What if the things that broke your heart were actually the things that set it free? What if the very moments that made you question God's love were the ones that proved it most? Because real love doesn't always give you what you want. It gives you what will save you. We expect answers to come wrapped in light, clarity, and joy. But sometimes, heaven answers in shadows. Not to confuse you, but to cover you. To protect what's still fragile. To close what isn't meant to continue. To pull you back from what would have destroyed your peace. And because we don't see what he sees, we call it disappointment. But heaven calls it direction. You'll only understand it later. When time has passed. When you've healed enough to look back with clearer eyes. Then you'll see. The delay that frustrated you was the pause that protected you. The person who left was the space that freed you. The closed door wasn't rejection, it was redirection toward something better. God doesn't owe us explanations, but he always offers revelation, eventually. And when that revelation comes, it humbles you. You realize that what you once begged him to fix, he was using to form you. That what felt like the end was the foundation of a new beginning. That his silence wasn't neglect, it was timing. He was never withholding your blessing. He was maturing your heart to hold it. Maybe that's the secret to peace. Learning to stop labeling moments as good or bad. Because sometimes pain and purpose walk hand in hand. Sometimes loss and love arrive in the same season. And sometimes what feels like being broken is actually being rebuilt. Think of Joseph, thrown into a pit, forgotten in prison, misunderstood for years. To everyone else it looked like failure, but heaven saw preparation. And when the time came, the story made sense. Not before, not during, only after. That's how most divine answers unfold. They don't announce themselves, they unfold quietly, slowly, in the same rhythm as your healing. And one day you look around and realize, the things that once made you cry now make you grateful. You stop asking, why did this happen? And start whispering, thank you for knowing better than I did. Because the truth is, God doesn't always answer with addition. Sometimes he answers with subtraction. He takes away what would have hurt you. He empties your hands so he can fill them with something new. He removes what you were clinging to, not to leave you empty, but to show you what real fulfillment feels like. And the beauty of it is this. Even when you didn't recognize his answer, his love never stopped speaking. It spoke through endings and beginnings, through the ache and the healing, through every quiet no that was actually a not yet. It was love all along. So maybe the next time life feels confusing, you'll remember this. The answer is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides behind what hurts. But if you stay, if you keep trusting through the confusion, one day you'll see that the disguise was grace, and the silence was mercy. Because God's love doesn't just answer prayers, it answers lives. Fully, faithfully, and in ways you'll understand only when you're finally ready to see. The faith that rises from exhaustion. There comes a point when you're just tired, not only physically, tired in your soul, tired of hoping, tired of praying, tired of believing that something good will come out of what feels like endless struggle. You reach that quiet, heavy place where you say, I can't keep doing this. And yet, somehow you still wake up the next morning. You still breathe. You still whisper, even if barely, help me. That whisper, that's faith. Not the loud, confident kind, but the kind that survives when everything else has burned down. People talk about strong faith like it's something beautiful and bold. But the truth is, real faith is messy. It's shaky hands, tear-stained cheeks, and tired hearts that still choose to trust. It's the kind that grows in the ashes of disappointment, not on the mountaintop of success. The kind that says, even if I don't see it, I'll still believe. That's not weakness. That's power, because it's born in surrender, not control. When you've lost everything that made sense, all that's left is what's real. And what's real is that love never left you. You may have stopped feeling it, but it never stopped surrounding you. That's the mystery of grace, and it holds you even when you've stopped holding on. It carries you when your strength runs out, because faith doesn't depend on your energy. It depends on his endurance. Sometimes God lets you come to the end of yourself not to break you, but to rebuild you on a foundation that cannot collapse. When you run out of your own strength, you finally begin to understand the source of true strength. That's when you realize faith was never about how much you could believe, but how deeply you were already believed in. You see, exhaustion has a way of emptying you of illusions. You stop pretending, you stop performing, you just exist, raw, honest, undone. And that's exactly where God meets you. Not in your perfection, but in your poverty of spirit. Not in your loud declarations, but in your silent surrender. There's a sacred moment when you stop trying to feel strong and simply allow yourself to be held. That's where renewal begins. In the acceptance that you can't fix everything, and you don't have to. The same love that brought you this far hasn't gone anywhere. It's right there in the stillness, waiting for you to stop striving long enough to notice it again. And then something subtle happens. It's not a burst of energy or a lightning flash of inspiration. It's softer than that. A small spark inside you, fragile but real. It's the decision to try again, even if just a little, to breathe deeper, to trust that maybe, just maybe, Love is still working beneath the exhaustion. That's faith reborn. Not the naive faith that expects everything to be easy, but the mature faith that knows love can still redeem what's hard. It's the faith that no longer asks, "Why me?" but whispers, "Teach me." It's the faith that doesn't chase miracles but recognizes that waking up with hope again is a miracle. And one day, not overnight, not with fanfare, you realize you're no longer surviving. You're standing, different, softer, stronger. Not because the storm disappeared, but because you discovered the calm within it. You found a peace that exhaustion couldn't steal. So if you're tired, it's okay. You're not failing. You're transforming. Your weariness isn't a sign that faith is dying. It's a sign that it's deepening. Because sometimes the truest faith doesn't roar. Sometimes it sighs. Sometimes it weeps. Sometimes it simply says, "I'm still here." And that's enough. Because in that quiet endurance, God is still working, not just around you, but within you. And that's where the strongest kind of faith is born, not out of confidence, but out of surrender. The invisible comfort. It doesn't happen suddenly. There's no flash of light, no voice from heaven, no miracle that announces itself. Healing begins quietly, like the first hint of dawn after a long night. You don't even notice it at first. You just realize one day that your chest doesn't ache quite as much, that you can breathe a little deeper, that you went a whole hour without replaying the pain. That's how God comforts, invisibly, gently, without demanding attention. We think comfort should be dramatic. We expect an instant wave of peace to wash away everything that hurts. But real comfort doesn't erase pain. It redeems it. It enters it. It sits beside you in the mess and whispers, "You're not alone." And even though nothing around you seems to change, something inside you does. You stop asking for the pain to disappear and start realizing that love has been holding you through it all. God's comfort rarely arrives with sound. It moves in presence. In the way a quiet morning feels safe. In the way sunlight touches your face after days of rain. In the warmth of someone's unexpected kindness. It's subtle, almost invisible, yet unmistakably sacred. Because comfort from heaven doesn't shout. It breathes. You might not see him, but you feel him. In the small mercies, the strength to get out of bed, the laughter that catches you off guard, the memory that no longer hurts as much. You start to sense that love has been near all along, weaving through every silent prayer and broken moment. And it's in those ordinary moments that the extraordinary begins to heal you. There's a peace that starts to form deep beneath the surface, not the kind that removes your questions, but the kind that sits beside them. It doesn't solve everything, it steadies everything. You begin to realize that the comfort you longed for was never going to come from explanations. It was always going to come from presence. That's why it's invisible, because it doesn't come from outside of you. It comes from within you, where God already lives. When you stop searching for him only in miracles, you start finding him in moments. Quiet, gentle, human moments. And that's where the deepest kind of healing begins. Sometimes comfort looks like endurance. Sometimes it looks like laughter returning after months of silence. Sometimes it looks like forgiveness, the kind that frees you, not the one who hurt you. Sometimes it's just the realization that what once broke you no longer defines you. That's God's love doing its quiet work, reshaping pain into peace. And the beauty of this comfort is that it doesn't depend on what happens next. It's not fragile. It's not temporary. It's not built on outcomes. It's built on the simple truth that you are never, not even for a moment, unheld. So when the world still feels heavy, when you wonder if you'll ever be completely okay, remember this. You're already being comforted, even now. You don't have to feel it for it to be real. Because comfort isn't about emotion, it's about presence. And presence is something God never withdraws. The healing you're waiting for isn't ahead of you, it's happening inside you, quietly, invisibly, faithfully. And one day, when you look back, You'll realize that the season you thought would end you was the very place where peace began to live. Because the comfort of God doesn't always come with words. Sometimes it just comes with breath, steady, gentle, enough. And in that breath you find Him again. When the soul learns to listen, there's a moment after the tears quiet and the noise fades, when something inside you shifts. It's not loud. It's not even easy to notice. But it's there, a new awareness, a subtle stillness, a calm curiosity that asks, "What is this peace I feel?" That's your soul learning to listen again. Not with ears, but with presence. You used to listen for signs. Loud, obvious proof that heaven had heard you. You wanted clarity that came in sentences, miracles, directions. But now you're beginning to recognize that God doesn't always speak through words. Sometimes He speaks through peace. Through the quiet nudge in your heart that says, "You don't have to worry anymore." Through the feeling that steadies you even when circumstances still haven't changed. Listening to God isn't about hearing something new. It's about remembering what's always been true. You were never alone. You were never abandoned. You were just too surrounded by noise to notice the presence that had been whispering all along. And now that you've slowed down, the whispers start to sound louder. Not because they've increased, but because you finally made room to hear them. The world tells you to move faster, to do more, to figure everything out. But heaven speaks the opposite. Slow down, breathe, stay present. Because God doesn't compete with the noise. He waits until you're ready for stillness. You begin to realize that listening isn't passive. It's participation. It's aligning your heartbeat with divine rhythm, saying without words, "I trust you." And as you do, something incredible happens. The chaos around you starts losing its power. What once triggered anxiety now triggers awareness. What once created fear now creates prayer. Your soul is learning a new language, the language of trust. It's strange how much peace you find when you stop demanding explanations, when you stop needing God to prove Himself and start recognizing that His love has been the proof all along. You don't chase His voice anymore. You recognize it. In the way your spirit softens instead of hardens. In the way compassion grows where bitterness used to live. In the way forgiveness comes easier than before. That's the sound of transformation. Quiet, steady, unmistakably divine. Sometimes you'll wonder if you're hearing right. You'll doubt your intuition, question your discernment. That's okay. God isn't fragile. He can handle your uncertainty. What matters is that you keep showing up. Keep choosing stillness. Keep letting love teach you how to hear again. Because listening to God isn't about decoding mysteries. It's about deepening intimacy. It's not a skill to master. It's a relationship to nurture. Every pause, every breath, every moment of peace that interrupts your worry, that's Him speaking, not in thunder but in tenderness. And the more you listen, the more you realize. His voice was never far. It was simply quiet. Because He wanted you close. Close enough to feel rather than just hear. Close enough to trust rather than just ask. Close enough to rest rather than strive. That's how the soul learns to listen. Through silence, through surrender, through small moments that turn into sacred awareness. It's not about hearing something new. It's about finally recognizing what's always been whispering. I'm here. I always have been. So when you feel that soft peace again, that pause in your chest, that unexplainable calm, don't brush it aside. That's the voice of love guiding you. You don't need more noise. You just need to keep listening. Because the more you listen, the clearer it becomes. Not as a sound, but as a certainty. You are guided, you are held, and you are deeply, endlessly loved. The presence that never left you. Look back now, and something inside you begins to understand. All those nights you cried in silence. All those mornings you forced yourself to keep going. All the prayers that seemed to hit a ceiling and fall back into your chest. You thought you were walking alone. But if you look closely, if you trace the steps, you'll see it. You were never walking by yourself. He was there in the details, not just in the miracles or the breakthroughs, but in the mundane, overlooked moments, in the conversation that gave you strength to face another day, in the memory that appeared at the exact moment you needed hope, in the way you somehow made it through what should have broken you. That's presence. Quiet, consistent, and unshakable. You used to believe that God's nearness would always feel like fire, like something powerful, overwhelming, impossible to miss. But now you know. Sometimes it feels like breath. Sometimes it feels like a quiet knowing. Sometimes it feels like peace that simply refuses to leave. His presence was never gone. It just took you time to learn. His silence doesn't mean his absence. We confuse feeling with fact. We think if we don't feel him, he's not there. But love doesn't depend on emotion, it depends on truth. And the truth is, he was there all along. Not standing at a distance, but sitting beside you in the ashes. Not waiting for you to get it right, but holding you even when you didn't. Every time you thought you were surviving on your own strength, you were actually being carried. Every time you whispered, "I can't take another step," something unseen lifted you just enough to take one more. That's what presence does. It sustains without demanding recognition. It protects even when you're too weary to notice. Think about the times you should have lost your faith, but didn't. The nights that could have destroyed you, but somehow didn't. That somehow was him. It always was. Not coincidence, not luck, presence. You may have walked through fire, but you didn't burn. You may have faced deep waters, but you didn't drown. And maybe that was the miracle. Not that you escaped the storm, but that you endured it without being undone. That's love at work. Quiet, faithful, invisible, but undeniable. Now, standing on the other side, you begin to see the pattern. Every closed door, every moment of silence, every long night. None of it was wasted. They were the chapters where presence wrote itself into your story. You couldn't see the ink while it was being written, but now the pages shine with meaning. You realize now, presence isn't something you earn. It's something you awaken to. It never left you. You just stopped noticing it in the noise. And even when you lost faith in yourself, he never lost faith in you. His love stayed. Not because you were strong, but because he was steadfast. There's something holy about that realization. The understanding that you were never truly alone. It humbles you. It softens you. It makes you see that grace isn't a moment. It's a constant. And no matter where life takes you next, you'll carry this awareness like a quiet light inside you. Even in the silence, even in the heartbreak, even in the confusion, he was there. You'll stop needing proof. You'll stop searching for signs. Because once you've recognized that kind of faithful presence, you never doubt it again. You simply rest in it. You live from it. You breathe because of it. So now, when the world feels heavy again, and it will, you won't panic. You'll close your eyes, breathe deep, and remember, the presence that never left you before won't leave you now. He's not just with you, he's in you, the calm inside your chaos, the light inside your shadow, the love that never walks away, the gratitude that awakens. It happens softly, not in the middle of a miracle, but in an ordinary morning. Sunlight spilling through the same window that once saw you cry. You pour your coffee, you sit quietly, and for the first time in a long time, you smile without forcing it. That's when it hits you. Gratitude. Not the shallow kind that lists blessings out of duty, but the deep, quiet gratitude that comes from surviving what you once thought would end you. You start to realize that every season, even the painful ones, gave you something. Not everything you wanted, but everything you needed. The waiting taught you patience. The silence taught you faith. The heartbreak taught you compassion. The losses taught you how to hold gently, to love freely, and to let go gracefully. And now, sitting here in this stillness, you feel something sacred. Not pride, not relief, but reverence. You begin to thank God not only for what happened, but for what didn't. For the doors that never opened. For the people who walked away before they could wound you deeper. For the times He didn't give you what you begged for because He was protecting what you couldn't yet see. That's when you understand. Unanswered prayers are sometimes the greatest gifts of all. Gratitude changes the way you see everything. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start whispering, "What did this teach me?" You stop chasing certainty and start cherishing presence. The little things become holy again. The morning air, the laughter that returns, the peace that settles quietly inside your chest. You start noticing miracles that used to go unseen because your heart was too heavy to recognize them. Now you see them everywhere, in every breath, every beam of light, every moment you're still here. This gratitude isn't loud. It's not the kind that shouts or posts or performs. It's the kind that kneels quietly in the soul, whispering thank you even for the storms. Because you've learned that storms don't just destroy, they cleanse. They wash away the false, the temporary, the unnecessary. And what remains after the rain is always pure. Gratitude doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. It allows you to look back at the same pain with different eyes. You stop seeing tragedy and start seeing transformation. You stop seeing detours and start seeing direction. You stop seeing emptiness and start recognizing space, sacred space where new things can grow. And maybe that's what healing truly is, when your why turns into thank you. When the place that once broke you becomes the place you meet God most deeply. When the tears that used to fall in sorrow now fall in awe, because you realize how every thread of your story, even the dark ones, was woven with purpose. You don't need everything to be perfect anymore. You don't need every answer or every plan. You've tasted peace and you know where it comes from. You know that grace has never failed you, not once. And now, you carry that knowing like light. You don't chase blessings, you recognize them. You don't demand proof, you are the proof. So tonight, when you lie down and think about your journey, let gratitude be your final thought. Not because everything is easy, but because everything is sacred. You've been carried, shaped, protected, loved, even when you didn't see it. And that realization alone is enough to fill the rest of your days with quiet praise. The peace that remains. It's strange how peace comes, not like a sunrise you can watch and measure, but like a quiet light that slowly fills the room. You can't quite tell when it arrived, only that it's here now, resting inside you. The same heart that once trembled at the unknown now beats calmly in the middle of uncertainty. The same mind that once screamed for answers now knows how to be still. That's not coincidence, that's transformation. This peace doesn't depend on what's happening around you. It flows from what's happening within you. It isn't built on control, but on surrender. It isn't temporary, like the comfort that fades when things get hard again. It stays, because it's not something you created. It's something you received. A quiet gift from a love that refused to give up on you. You remember how you used to fight the silence, beg for signs, chase clarity. Now you sit in the same quiet and feel something sacred there. You've learned that not knowing is not the same as being lost. You can wait without worry. You can breathe without fear. You can trust that even when you don't see the path, the one who walks beside you does. This is what peace feels like. Not the absence of struggle, but the absence of panic. Not the end of pain, but the beginning of purpose. You don't have to understand everything to rest inside what's real, because what's real is that love still holds you, and once you've tasted that, you stop chasing anything else. There's a quiet confidence now, one that doesn't need to prove or predict. You've seen enough to know that even the dark seasons have meaning. Even the delays carry direction. Even the endings hide beginnings. And because of that, you no longer cling. You trust. You no longer demand. You receive. You no longer fear, you rest. That's what peace does. It settles into your bones until it becomes who you are. It doesn't come and go with circumstances. It lives in you. And when the next storm comes, because life will always bring storms, you won't crumble the same way. You'll remember how you made it through before, how you were carried when you couldn't stand. And you'll know, the peace that held you once will hold you again. You've learned that faith doesn't prevent the rain. It teaches you to dance beneath it. You've learned that love doesn't always remove the pain. It redeems it. And you've learned that peace isn't found when everything settles. It's found when you finally do. There's a freedom in this knowing. A soft, holy kind of freedom. The kind that lets you breathe deeply, love openly, forgive quickly. Because once you realize you've been loved through your worst, you stop fearing what's next. You stop doubting what's possible. You live lighter, slower, deeper, and maybe that's the point of it all. To come to this place where peace is no longer something you reach for, but something that lives inside you. A constant whisper saying, you're safe, you're held, you're loved. This is the peace that remains. It doesn't fade when life changes. It doesn't tremble when fear knocks. It doesn't end when the chapter closes. Because it's rooted in something eternal, a love that outlasts every season, every storm, every silence. So rest now. Not because the journey is over, but because you've learned how to walk it differently. With open hands, with a quiet heart, with peace that doesn't need to be found anymore because it finally found you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. John 14:27. Take a deep breath. You've made it through storms you thought would never end. You've walked through nights that felt endless. And yet, here you are, still standing, still breathing, still loved. That isn't luck. That's grace. The silence that once frightened you became your teacher. The pain that once broke you became your proof of endurance. And now, you carry something the world can't take from you. Peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, faith that doesn't need to see, and love that never walks away. When life feels uncertain again, because it will, close your eyes and remember. The same presence that carried you here is already waiting in the next moment. You don't have to know how everything will unfold. You only have to know who holds it all. Let his love be the calm within your chaos,